A man dressed as a clown walks into a children's hospital. Kids smile. Parents feel safe. He makes balloon animals. He tells jokes. Everyone thinks he is wonderful. A pillar of the community. A successful businessman. A friend to politicians. Someone you would trust with your children. But underneath his house, in the dark crawl space where nobody looks, there is evidence of terrible crimes. 26 victims. Young men. Teenage boys. All hidden in the dirt. Some were placed on top of each other because he ran out of space. And nobody suspected a thing. This is not a horror movie. This is real. This happened in Chicago in the 1970s. In a regular neighborhood where families lived normal lives. Where people went to work every morning and came home every evening. Where a dangerous person hid behind a smile and a clown costume. 33 young men lost their lives. Most of them were never reported missing. The ones who were dismissed as runaways. Their families begged the police to investigate. But nobody listened. Because how could a respectable businessman be dangerous? How could someone who entertains children at birthday parties be capable of such crimes? The answer is terrifying. Because this man was not hiding. He was living in plain sight. He had dinner parties. He knew politicians. He was photographed with the First Lady. He was active in his community. He seemed so normal that even when police came to his door multiple times, they never suspected what was really happening inside. What makes this story even more disturbing is how many chances there were to stop him. How many times did the police almost catch him but let him go? How many victims could have been saved if someone had just looked a little deeper? If someone had questioned his excuses? If someone had searched his house sooner? But they did not. And for years, young men kept disappearing. One after another. Sometimes two in the same night. Their families waited for them to come home. They reported them missing. They called the police over and over. But in the 1970s, missing young men were not a priority. Especially if they were poor. Especially if they were involved in risky behavior. Especially if they did not fit the image of the perfect victim. This person knew that. He understood how society worked. He knew which victims nobody would look for. He knew how to appear trustworthy. He knew exactly what to say to the police. And he used that knowledge to become one of the most prolific criminals in American history. The story you are about to hear will shock you. Not just because of the serious crimes, but because of how easy it was for this man to fool everyone. How he walked among us. How he shook hands with respected people. How he made children laugh while evidence of his crimes remained hidden under his floor. John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago in 1942. From outside, his family seemed normal. Working class. Nothing unusual. But inside the home, things were different. His father was a violent person who mistreated him regularly. Called him weak. Called him stupid. Nothing young John did was ever good enough. He grew up desperate for approval. Desperate to prove he was successful. Desperate to show everyone he was important. And on the surface, he succeeded. He became a businessman. He got married. He had a family. He joined community organizations. He became politically active. Everything looked perfect from outside. But there was a darkness nobody could see. In 1968, Gacy was living in Iowa, managing restaurants for his father-in-law. He had a wife and 2 children, a good job, a nice life. But he was also doing something terrible. He was harming boys who worked for him. One of these boys finally told the police. Gacy was arrested and charged. When he went to trial, He was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison, but he only served 18 months, less than 2 years, for destroying a young person's life. Then he was released, free to start again, free to move to a new place where nobody knew his past. He moved to Chicago and settled in Norwood Park, a quiet suburban neighborhood. He started a construction company called PDM Contractors. He married again. He seemed to be living a normal life. He even created a clown character named Pogo. He would dress up and perform at children's parties and hospitals. People loved him. They thought he was generous, kind, a good man giving back to his community. But behind closed doors, something very different was happening. Gacy had discovered that young men were easy targets, boys looking for work, teenagers who needed money, runaways who nobody would miss. He would offer them jobs at his construction company, promise them good pay, then he would bring them to his house. His method was always similar. Get them comfortable, offer them drinks with substances mixed in, then show them a magic trick with handcuffs. He would put the handcuffs on himself first, show them how easy it was, then offer to let them try. Once the handcuffs were on, the victim was trapped, and the terrible situation would begin. What happened next was too horrible to describe in detail. Hours of suffering, harm beyond imagination. And when Gacy was finished, he would end their lives, usually through strangulation with rope or his hands, and then he would move their remains down to the crawl space under his house and hide them in the dirt. His first victim was Timothy McCoy in 1972, a 16-year-old boy passing through Chicago. Gacy met him at the bus station, offered him a place to stay. The boy never made it home, but nobody connected his disappearance to Gacy. Why would they? Gacy was just a friendly stranger who offered help. Over the next 6 years, Gacy committed these crimes again and again. He developed a system, a pattern. He knew exactly what type of victim to choose. Boys who were vulnerable, boys who were alone, boys who nobody would immediately report missing. He was careful, he was methodical, and he was confident he would never get caught. In 1975, an 18-year-old named Johnny Butkovich came to Gacy's house. Johnny had worked for Gacy's construction company, but Gacy had not paid him. Johnny was angry. He demanded his money. They argued for hours. Finally, Johnny left. But he never made it home. His car was found abandoned just blocks away with his wallet and money still inside. Johnny's father immediately suspected something was wrong. He called the police. He told them about the argument with Gacy. He begged them to investigate. But police talked to Gacy and believed his story. Gacy said Johnny had left his house just fine. He had witnesses who saw the boy leave. Where he went after that was a mystery. Police closed the case. They dismissed it as a runaway situation. If they had searched Gacy's house then, they would have found Johnny's remains in the garage. They would have found other victims in the crawl space. They would have stopped Gacy before he could harm 28 more people. But they did not search. They believed him. And Johnny's family was left with questions that would haunt them for years. Young men kept disappearing, one after another. Some were Gacy's employees. Some were boys he met at bus stations. Some were just walking down the street when Gacy pulled up in his black car and offered them a ride. Most were never reported missing, the ones who were treated as runaways. Police had no idea these cases were connected, no idea a dangerous person was operating in their city. Then, in 1977, something happened that should have stopped Gacy forever. A 27-year-old man named Jeffrey Rignall was walking home when Gacy pulled up beside him. Gacy offered him substances, invited him to get in the car. As soon as Rignall got in, Gacy attacked him. He put a cloth soaked with chloroform over his face. Rignall passed out. When he woke up, he was in Gacy's house, restrained with handcuffs. For hours, Gacy harmed him, used chloroform to knock him out over and over. Each time Rignall regained consciousness, the terrible situation started again. Finally, inexplicably, Gacy let him go. He left him in a park, alive but badly injured. Rignall went straight to the police. He told them everything. He described what happened. He described Gacy's car, a black Oldsmobile. He even remembered seeing an expressway exit sign during the drive. Police believed his story, but without a name or address, they said there was nothing they could do. Rignall was furious. He decided to find his attacker himself. He went to the expressway exit he remembered, and he waited. Day after day, week after week, he watched thousands of cars pass by. Most people would have given up, but Rignall was determined. And finally, after months of searching, he saw it. The black Oldsmobile, the same car. He followed it to Norwood Park. I watched it pull into a driveway at 8213 Summerdale Avenue. Rignall had found his attacker. He went back to police with the address and license plate number. Police identified the owner, John Wayne Gacy. When they checked his record, they found his conviction from Iowa, harm to a minor. This was serious. But there was a problem. So much time had passed that physical evidence was gone. It was Rignall's word against Gacy's. A respected businessman against someone who admitted to being different in the 1970s. Gacy was charged only with battery, a minor offense. The fine was just $100. No jail time. He was released while waiting for trial, and he was free to continue his crimes. The system had failed again. Meanwhile, Johnny Butkovich's father kept calling the police, over and over, begging them to investigate Gacy. But the police kept dismissing him. They said his son was a runaway. There was no evidence of foul play. The father knew something was wrong. He could feel it. But nobody would listen. More young men disappeared. Some were reported missing. Most were not. Gacy was committing these crimes so frequently now that he was running out of room in his crawl space. Some remains he placed on top of older ones. Some he disposed of in the Des Plaines River. He even considered putting them in his attic, but decided against it. His criminal activity had become routine for him. Just another part of his life. His neighbors started complaining about a terrible smell coming from his house. A thick, bad odor that made people sick. The building manager called Gacy several times. "What is that smell?" Gacy always had an excuse. His freezer broke. His fish tank needed cleaning. Trapped animals died in the walls. People believed him because he was so convincing, so friendly. How could this nice man be hiding something horrible? Then on December 11th, 1978, everything changed. 15-year-old Robert Piest told his mother he was going to talk to a contractor about a summer job. The contractor had come into the pharmacy where Robert worked, offered him twice what the pharmacy paid. Robert's mother waited in the car. She was going to drive him home after his shift. It was her birthday. They had plans to celebrate together. Robert went to meet the contractor. He said he would be back in a few minutes, but he never returned. His mother waited and waited. When he did not come back, she went inside to look for him. He was gone. His co-workers said he had left with a man named John Gacy. Robert's parents immediately called the police. This was different from other cases. Robert was not a runaway. He had a close relationship with his family. He was a good student. He had no reason to disappear. Police took this seriously, especially Lieutenant Joseph Kozenczak. He had a teenage son the same age as Robert. He understood the fear these parents were feeling. Kozenczak investigated Gacy's background. What he found was disturbing. The conviction from Iowa, the pending case with Jeffrey Rignall, a pattern of violence against young men. He knew Robert was in serious danger. He went to Gacy's house immediately. When Gacy answered the door, he seemed calm. Too calm. He denied ever meeting Robert Piest. Said he had been dealing with a family emergency. His uncle had just died. He needed to call his mother. Kozenczak's instincts told him Gacy was lying. But without evidence, he could not arrest him. He asked Gacy to come to the station later to make a formal statement. Gacy agreed. Kozenczak knew he needed more. He applied for a search warrant. It was granted based on Gacy's criminal history and the witness testimony that Robert was last seen going to meet him. When Gacy came to the station that evening, Kozenczak served him the warrant and demanded his house keys. Gacy's reaction was shocking. He became angry, threatened the officers, said he knew important people. He would have their jobs. They had no idea who they were dealing with. This outburst told Kozenczak everything. Gacy was hiding something big. The search of Gacy's house revealed disturbing items: adult materials, restraints, handcuffs, a wooden board with restraints, and a device clearly meant for harmful purposes. They also found personal items that did not belong to Gacy: a class ring, clothing too small for him, a jacket similar to what Robert Piest wore. In the kitchen trash, they found something crucial: a receipt from Nissen Pharmacy where Robert worked. Gacy claimed he never met Robert, but here was proof Robert had been in his house. They also discovered a crawl space under the house. When Kozenczak opened the trapdoor, a musty smell hit him, but he saw no sign of Robert. The dirt appeared undisturbed. They left with the evidence they collected. But Kozenczak was not satisfied. He ordered round-the-clock surveillance on Gacy. Then Robert's mother remembered something. The night Robert disappeared, a co-worker had put a photo developing receipt in the pocket of his jacket. Kozenczak rushed to check the evidence. There it was. A receipt from Nissen Pharmacy. He called the pharmacy. The numbers matched perfectly. This was the smoking gun, proof that Robert Piest was in Gacy's home. But Kozenczak still needed more for another search warrant. Amazingly, Gacy gave it to him. The contractor became cocky. He invited the surveillance officers inside his house, offered them coffee, talked about his clown hobby. Then he said something chilling. He told them that a clown can get away with anything. While the officers talked with Gacy, one needed to use the bathroom. When the heater kicked on, a horrible smell came through the vents. Sweet. Bad. Unmistakable. The smell of decomposition. It was coming from under the house. This was all Kozenczak needed. He got a second search warrant. But before they could execute it, Gacy was arrested on an unrelated charge. He had become so reckless that he put illegal substances in a stranger's pocket right in front of police. With Gacy in custody, investigators returned to his house, this time with a full team, and this time they knew where to look. They went straight to the crawl space, started digging in the hard dirt. Almost immediately, they found human remains. Then more, then more. The more they dug, the more they found. It was not just one victim, not just Robert Piest. There were dozens of victims hidden under Gacy's house. The scene was horrific. Remains in various states. Some had been there for years. Some were recent. Many were placed on top of each other. Lime had been poured on them to speed decomposition and reduce smell, but it was not enough. The evidence of Gacy's crimes had been right under his floor all along. In total, they found 27 victims in and around his house, 26 in the crawl space, 1 under the garage concrete. It was Johnny Butkovich, the young man whose father had begged police to investigate years earlier. If they had listened then, how many lives could have been saved? Confronted with this discovery, Gacy confessed, but he showed no remorse, no emotion. He described the crimes casually, explained his methods like he was discussing a hobby. He admitted to harming Robert Piest and disposing of his remains in the Des Plaines River, said there was no room left under the house. He also confessed to disposing of other in the river. How many? He could not remember exactly. Maybe 4, maybe more. He had lost count. Over the next 5 months, police recovered remains from the water. Finally, they found Robert Piest, the boy whose disappearance had brought Gacy's reign of terror to an end. The trial began in 1980. There was no question Gacy committed the crimes. He had confessed. The evidence was overwhelming. The only question was his sanity. If found insane, he could go to a mental hospital, possibly be released someday. But if found sane, he would face the death penalty. The defense argued he must be insane. Who else would commit and hide 33 crimes under their house? But the prosecution showed that Gacy knew exactly what he was doing. He planned carefully. He hid evidence. He lied to police. He chose vulnerable victims who would not be missed. These were not the actions of an insane person. These were the actions of a cold, calculating predator. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They found him guilty on all 33 counts. Sane at the time of each crime, he was sentenced to death. John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. His last words were defiant. He showed no remorse. Even at the very end, he maintained control. Or tried to. This story shows us how dangerous people can hide behind a friendly face, how predators walk among us looking completely normal. John Wayne Gacy fooled everyone because society was not paying attention. Share this story to spread awareness about staying alert. Subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories that teach us important lessons. Always be attentive and aware, because we never know when danger is near us. Together, we can create a safer society by learning from the past. Now let's move on to the second serial killer story. From October 1972 through February 1973, Herbert listened to what the sound told him. He took the lives of 13 people in Santa Cruz, California, and the areas around it. Police couldn't find any clear pattern, no obvious reason that made sense to anyone but Herbert. Because in his thoughts, he wasn't someone who killed people. He was someone who saved them. Each person whose life he ended, he thought, kept millions of others alive. Herbert believed with his whole heart that he was carrying out a sacred duty, that history would one day understand his actions, that future generations would thank him for preventing the disaster he saw coming. Herbert William Mullen came into the world on April 18, 1947, in Salinas, California. He was born when America was growing after the war, when families were moving into clean neighborhoods, getting houses, looking for steady lives. Herbert's father was a tough, strict man who fought in World War II and worked very hard and wanted his son to work hard too. His mother believed strongly in the Catholic faith, firm but caring, teaching her son that life had rules and breaking rules brought punishment. When he was young, Herbert looked like any other child. People who lived near him said he was nice, showed respect, and stayed quiet. In his high school years, he played in sports, had a girlfriend, and even got named most likely to succeed. His teachers thought he was smart and able to do well. Nobody saw the terrible things that would later take over his mind, but there were small signs that something wasn't quite right. Looking back, some people remembered moments when Herbert seemed distant, when his eyes looked empty, when he would stare at nothing for long periods of time. When Herbert turned 18, his closest friend Dean lost his life in a car accident. The quick loss broke Herbert completely. He couldn't stop thinking about death, built a special place in his room for Dean, and wouldn't stop talking about him. The sadness grabbed onto Herbert harder than it did for other people his age. It emptied him from the inside, made him weak. Some say this was the moment when Herbert's mind truly began to crack, when the thin wall between reality and imagination started crumbling. After finishing high school, Herbert tried to keep living a regular life. He signed up for Cababrio College to learn about engineering, but this was California in the 1960s, and the young people were changing everything. Herbert tried drugs, LSD, marijuana, hashish. For most young folks, it was just fun, a way to see things differently. For Herbert, it was the start of his mind falling apart. Instead of feeling more awake, he felt scared. He became sure that people were laughing at him when he couldn't see, planning things against him. His thinking became messy, confused, and then he started hearing sounds that weren't there. When he reached his early 20s, Herbert was breaking down. Doctors said he had schizophrenia, and he went in and out of mental hospitals. Medical workers saw the clear warning signs: fear of others, hearing things, strange actions. They gave him medicine, but he wouldn't take it, saying that doctors wanted to control his mind. His parents did their best to help, but they couldn't get through to him. He drifted between group homes and hospitals, never steady. Each time Herbert left a hospital, his family hoped he would get better, that the treatment had worked. But within weeks or sometimes just days, he would fall back into his own world. He stopped bathing regularly, stopped eating proper meals, stopped caring about the basic things that keep a person connected to normal life. His appearance changed too. The clean-cut young man who once wore nice clothes and kept his hair neat became someone who looked lost, with wild eyes and wrinkled clothing. Friends from his earlier years who saw him on the street barely recognized him. And then his false beliefs mixed with something that actually existed. California has always faced the danger of earthquakes, and in Herbert's thoughts, these natural events became connected to the sounds he heard. He started believing that earthquakes weren't caused by the Earth's movements. They were caused by right and wrong, and they could be stopped. The sounds told him that unless people died, the ground would break open and swallow all of California. Blood was the only answer. People had to be killed, and Herbert had been picked to do it. In his twisted understanding of the world, he saw himself as a bridge between the living and the forces of nature. He thought ancient civilizations had done the same thing, that human sacrifice was the original way people kept disasters away. He believed modern society had forgotten this truth, and now he alone carried the burden of this terrible knowledge. Herbert spent hours reading about old cultures, about the Aztecs and their temples, about ancient rituals performed to please the gods. In his mind, these weren't stories from the past. They were instructions for the present. He convinced himself that the earth spoke to certain chosen people throughout history, and now it was speaking to him. The voices became clearer, more demanding. They gave him specific instructions about when to act, where to go, who to choose. Herbert began carrying weapons with him everywhere. A knife in his pocket, a bat in his car, later a gun. He was always ready, always waiting for the signal that would tell him it was time for another sacrifice. The first killing happened on October 13th, 1972. Herbert was in his car when he saw 55-year-old Lawrence White, a man with no home who was trying to get a ride. Herbert pulled over, said he would help. White got inside. They drove for some time, and then the sounds told Herbert what to do. He stopped the car, picked up a baseball bat, and beat White to death on the road's edge. To Herbert, this wasn't killing, it was saving people. Only 11 days after, on October 24th, Herbert picked up another person looking for a ride. 24-year-old Cababrio College student Mary Guilfoyle. She was late for her class. Herbert said he would take her. At one point, he took out a knife and stabbed her until she died. After, he cut open her body, saying later that he needed to check if she had been killed the right way. Her body wasn't found until many months passed. On November 2nd, Herbert did something worse again. He went into St. Mary's Catholic Church in Los Gatos. Inside, 65-year-old Father Henri Toé was listening to confessions. Herbert went into the small room as if to tell his wrong actions, but he pulled out a hunting knife and stabbed the priest to death. Later, Herbert said that Father Tom had agreed through his thoughts to be killed. By this time, Santa Cruz County was filled with worry. 3 terrible killings in only a few weeks with nobody caught. Police couldn't see how the dead people were connected. Families started locking their doors, looking at strangers with more care. But the killing had only just started. On January 25th, 1973, Herbert killed again. He chose a house in Santa Cruz where 29-year-old Kathy Francis lived with her husband Jim and their 2 small sons. Herbert broke into their home and shot all 4 of them dead. Also killed was their friend, 24-year-old David Oliker, who was just visiting. Herbert said later that Kathy had let people needing rides into her car before, including Mary Guilfoyle, and so she had allowed the killing. 6 days after, Herbert drove into the Santa Cruz Mountains. There, he found 4 young men staying in tents in the forest. They were between 18 and 23 years old, having a good time in nature. Herbert came close to them with a rifle. Without waiting, he shot all 4, killing them where they were sitting. Later, he said the young men had agreed through their thoughts. Santa Cruz was falling apart. The fear wasn't quiet talk anymore. It showed in every locked door, every closed window, every tired look people gave each other. Unknown people were being killed in their houses. People hiking were being shot in the woods. People in their cars weren't protected. Even priests, men of faith, weren't safe from whoever was doing this. Families who used to let their kids play in the neighborhoods until evening now brought them inside much earlier, not willing to risk anything. Getting rides from strangers, something that used to happen all the time in the relaxed California coast areas, almost stopped completely overnight. It felt like a dark cloud had settled over Santa Cruz, and nobody knew when danger would come again. The lack of pattern was too much to handle. This wasn't someone who picked a certain kind of person where at least others could feel somewhat safe. This was complete disorder. One day a man with no home, the next a young woman, then a whole family killed in seconds. It seemed like the killer was in all places and no place at the same time. People stopped trusting anyone. The friendly neighbor could be the killer. The person asking for directions could be planning an attack. The man sitting in his car on the street could be watching, waiting. Parents told their children not to talk to anyone they didn't know. Store owners kept baseball bats behind their counters. Some people even left Santa Cruz completely, packing up their families and moving to other cities where they felt safer. Local businesses suffered as tourists stopped coming. The beautiful beaches sat empty. The hiking trails that once brought visitors from all over stood quiet and unused. Santa Cruz, which had been known as a peaceful paradise by the ocean, was now known as a place of death. And if that wasn't bad enough, there was another dangerous person in Santa Cruz right at the same time. While Herbert Mullen was killing anyone, another man, Edmund Kemper, was hunting young female students, taking them from roads, murdering them, cutting their bodies into pieces, and sometimes keeping their heads like prizes. Two killers, completely different in their reasons and ways, working within miles of each other. Police had trouble figuring out which crimes belonged to which person. People living there didn't care about the differences. They only knew their city had become a place of hunting. The police department held community meetings, trying to calm people down, trying to give advice on staying safe. But what could they really say? Don't go outside? Don't trust anyone? Lock your doors and hope for the best? The police chief stood before worried crowds, his face showing the stress of leading a department that couldn't stop the violence. Detectives worked day and night, following every lead, checking every tip that came in. But with no clear pattern and no witnesses, they were chasing shadows. The newspapers grabbed onto it. News stories called Santa Cruz the murder capital of the world. It wasn't saying too much. Within just months, two people who killed many had turned the peaceful college town into a place of terror. The local police were doing too much, tired out, and getting more desperate. And while everyone was waiting for the next attack, Herbert Mullen was getting ready to do it. On the morning of February 13th, 1973, 72-year-old Fred Perez was outside his small home on a peaceful street. It was a regular day. He was working on his garden, doing the kind of calm, simple work that older retired people often do to keep themselves busy. People nearby knew Fred as a kind, hard-working man, someone who stayed to himself and liked the slow pace of retirement. There was nothing special about that morning, at least not until Herbert showed up. Herbert had been driving without direction, his rifle in the car next to him. By that time, the killings weren't even planned like most people think of planning. Herbert was acting like someone controlled by something else, looking for chances, waiting for the permission he thought came through thoughts. He saw Fred bending down over the dirt in his front yard, and that was enough. In Herbert's broken mind, Fred had said yes. Herbert made his car go slower, got out, and without stopping, raised his rifle. In the peaceful morning air, the shot sounded like thunder. One bullet went through Fred Perez, making him fall right away among the garden roses he had worked so hard on. But this time, Herbert hadn't killed in secret. This time, someone was looking. A neighbor, surprised by the sound, looked out and saw everything happen. They saw the shooter, a thin, messy-looking man with strong eyes, get back in his car, still holding the rifle. They watched the car drive away fast, and they wrote down the license plate number. For months, Herbert Mullen had been the mystery killer, his dead victims everywhere, his reasons impossible to understand, his identity hidden. But now, with that license plate written down, the cover was torn off. Police didn't wait at all. They checked the plate, got a name, and found Herbert Mullen in only hours. When officers came close, they found him sitting in his car, the killing weapon still inside. The arrest was simple, almost too quiet compared to the bloody, terrible things he had done. But to the people of Santa Cruz, it was the moment they had been hoping for. The mystery finally had a face. At the police station, detectives started asking him questions, and Herbert didn't fight back. He didn't say no. He didn't ask for a lawyer or make up some weak excuse. Instead, he told them calmly, almost like it was normal, why he had killed 13 people. The sounds, he said, had told him to do it. He said that each person he killed had given themselves to him quietly, through their thoughts. That without their deaths, earthquakes would have torn California into pieces, killing millions. He didn't talk like someone who had just been caught doing something terrible. He talked like someone who truly believed what he was saying. To the detectives listening, it felt unreal. They weren't hearing the confession of a smart criminal who planned everything. They were hearing the confused talk of a man so lost in false beliefs that the real world didn't exist anymore. A man who really believed he had been chosen to save people by killing them. During the questioning, Herbert even showed frustration that people couldn't understand his mission. He explained in detail how he calculated the number of deaths needed, how he selected his victims based on signals only he could perceive, how each sacrifice was timed with cosmic events. The detectives sat in stunned silence as Herbert laid out his delusional logic with the confidence of someone explaining basic mathematics. His court case started in 1973. His lawyers said he was insane, pointing to his schizophrenia, his false beliefs, his long history of mental problems. But the prosecutors said that Herbert knew right from wrong. He had hidden proof. He had escaped being caught. He had planned his killings. He wasn't insane. They said he was cold and planned everything carefully. The jury made a mixed decision. Herbert Mullen was found guilty of 10 murders, 2 of the worst kind, 8 of the second worst kind. He was given life in prison. Behind prison walls, Herbert stayed unpredictable. Sometimes he was quiet, kept to himself, lost in his own thoughts. Other times he shouted about earthquakes, about right and wrong, about killings. He asked to get out of prison several times over the many years, but was always told no. Prison officials decided he showed no sorry feelings and was still dangerous. For almost 50 years, Herbert Mullen spent his days in prison. In August 2022, at the age of 75, he died behind bars. The sounds that had bothered him, the ones he said asked for blood to keep the earth steady, finally stopped. Herbert Mullen's story is one of the most disturbing in American true crime history. He didn't kill for fun or for money or to get back at someone. He killed because he believed the lives of millions depended on what he did. In his thoughts, he was a chosen savior doing a job no one else could understand. But the truth was much simpler and much darker. He was a man eaten up by mental illness that wasn't treated, fear of everything, and violence. And what happened was 13 innocent lives ended too soon, families broken, and a community left hurt. Today, his crimes show us that sometimes the most scary monsters aren't hiding in dark places at all. They're walking next to us, looking normal, hearing sounds that no one else can hear. Sounds that can turn quiet words into screams and thoughts into blood. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Now let's move on to the third serial killer story. He walked into the police station and said 5 words that made detectives' blood run cold. I can show you more. More bodies. More victims. More than anyone imagined. He didn't just confess to one murder. He confessed to 6 more. And then he offered something truly horrifying, a guided tour. "I'll take you to them," he said calmly. "I know exactly where they are." One by one, he led police through the streets of Gary, Indiana, a city with over 10,000 abandoned houses. He pointed to decaying structures like someone pointing out landmarks on a vacation. "That one," he'd say. And inside, behind broken doors and shattered windows, detectives would find another body, another woman, another victim the world had forgotten. 7 women, all strangled, all hidden in buildings that society had already abandoned, just like the women themselves. But here's what makes this case truly terrifying. Van didn't stop talking. He mentioned other cities: Chicago, California, Texas, Wisconsin, Minnesota. He told investigators about victims going back 20 years. He said when he felt the urge, he'd simply board a train or bus, travel to another state, and find someone new. Random strangers. Wrong place. Wrong time. "How many?" detectives asked. His answer haunts them to this day. "A lot more than you think." This wasn't just a serial killer. This was a man who understood something most people never realize: which victims society ignores, which neighborhoods police don't watch, and how to move through the cracks of America's broken system. And the question that keeps investigators awake at night is simple but horrifying. How many more are still out there? Darren Dion Van was born on March 21, 1971, in Gary, Indiana. He came into a world that was already dying. The city that once roared with steel mills and factory jobs was shutting down. One by one, businesses closed, workers left. Families moved away, searching for opportunities elsewhere. The buildings they left behind just stood there, empty, rotting, becoming shells of what they used to be. Young Darren grew up surrounded by this decay. Violence was normal. Gangs controlled the streets. Substances were sold openly. Shootings happened regularly. Women were exploited without anyone asking questions. This was the environment that shaped him. Not one single trauma, but years of watching misery treated as normal. Years of learning that some lives matter less than others. Nobody who knew him as a child remembers him as special or different. Teachers did not notice him. Neighbors could not recall specific details about him. He was just another kid in a dying city. He learned early that being forgettable was an advantage. Being invisible meant avoiding consequences. So he became a human shadow. Someone you might pass on the street without ever remembering his face. In 1991, Van joined the United States Marine Corps. This should have been a turning point. The military breaks people down and rebuilds them with discipline and structure. But for Van, it did not work. He was discharged in 1993 with an other-than-honorable discharge. Even the Marines, an institution designed to transform men, wanted nothing to do with him. He returned to civilian life more disconnected and dangerous than before. As an adult, Van tried to create a normal appearance. He married a woman who was nearly 30 years older than him. It was not about love or genuine connection. It was about having a cover, a facade of stability while the rest of his identity remained empty. The marriage fell apart quietly, without drama, without emotional impact. It just dissolved like everything else in his life. Van moved on, never forming real bonds, never integrating into any community. April 6th, 2004, Gary, Indiana. This is when Van first appears in official criminal records. He went to a house demanding to see a woman he believed was inside. When he did not get what he wanted, He left and returned with a red gasoline container. He poured fuel around the property and threatened to light it with a lighter in his hand. A witness tried to reason with him, but Van made it clear this was about control and leverage. He demanded $7,000 to release the situation. Police arrived and arrested him for residential entry and intimidation. He served time on a probation violation. Then he disappeared back into Gary. This incident was the first recorded sign of the violence he would fully develop later. But nobody saw it as a warning. Nobody connected this incident to what he would become. 3 years later, in 2007, Van was in Austin, Texas. Another incident. Another woman. Court records show a 25-year-old female entered his apartment. She later told police he attacked her violently, threw her down, choked her, harmed her, told her he could end her life. This was not random chaos. This was targeted violence in a controlled space. A pattern was forming. Van pleaded guilty to aggravated assault. He was sentenced. He served time in a Texas prison. But prison does not fix certain types of people. It just gives them time to think, time to plan, time to harden without distraction. Research shows that some offenders use prison as a pause button, not as a deterrent. They come out more refined in their methods. He was released in July 2013. After leaving Texas custody, Van returned to Lake County, Indiana, and registered as an offender. He was classified as low risk. That designation would become one of the most catastrophic mistakes in this entire case, because the system believed he was low risk. They thought he was manageable. They had no idea what he had truly become during those years in prison. No idea that he was about to escalate into something far more dangerous. October 17th, 2014. Africa Hardy was 19 years old. She had recently moved to the Chicago area after graduating from high school. She was trying to build independence and stability in her life. That night, she arranged a meeting through an online platform where she advertised her services. She traveled to a Motel 6 located on East 179th Street in Hammond, Indiana, for the appointment. Throughout the evening, she exchanged messages with her friend and business partner who monitored her safety from a distance. The friend later explained that Afrika's communication rhythm suddenly changed. Normal messaging turned into short responses, then silence. When Afrika stopped answering her phone completely, her friend became worried. She and another person drove to the motel to check on her. When they entered the room, they immediately found Afrika deceased in the bathtub. Her body showed clear signs of strangulation. Red marks around her neck, evidence of a struggle, a torn protection wrapper on the bathroom floor, a broken fingernail on the tile. Everything pointed to a violent confrontation before her passing. Surveillance video from the motel parking lot captured a dark-colored Jeep arriving during the exact appointment time frame. A male suspect was seen exiting the vehicle and walking toward Afrika's rented room. Detectives conducted a reverse lookup on the phone number used to arrange the appointment. It traced back to a residence in Gary, Indiana. A blue Jeep registered to someone's sister was located at that address. The vehicle matched the Jeep captured on the motel security footage. Within hours, police arrested Darren Dion Van. Once in custody and advised of his rights, he confessed during a recorded interview. According to official documents, Van admitted that he strangled Afrika first with his hands and then with a cord. He said that after she passed away, he placed her body in the bathtub, left the room, and drove away in the blue Jeep. This confession was supported by overwhelming physical evidence, phone records, surveillance video, items found inside the Jeep tied to the original appointment. The coroner later determined that the cause of passing was strangulation, followed by additional compression. The presence of the torn wrapper and signs of struggle confirmed that Afrika had fought back against her attacker. This was the moment law enforcement finally caught Darren Dion Van. The digital trail, the vehicle match, his direct confession, all created an immediately prosecutable case. But what happened next shocked everyone. Within less than 48 hours of Afrika Hardy's body being discovered, Van did something unexpected. He started talking, and he kept talking. He told detectives about 6 more women. He said he knew exactly where they were, and he offered to show police the locations. Tiara Beatty was 28 years old, a young mother trying to stabilize her life in Gary. On January 13th, 2014, she met up with a friend near the east side. Sometime after that moment, she simply vanished. She did not come home. She did not call anyone back. She disappeared into the thousands of abandoned structures that dotted Gary's landscape. Van knew those buildings better than anyone. He used them as his personal disposal system. Beatty was not found for 9 months. On October 19th, 2014, after Van was arrested, he led police to an abandoned residence at 1800 East 19th Avenue. Inside that structure, investigators found her remains. The place was filled with trash and debris. It felt less like a house and more like a sealed tomb. This single recovery location explained everything. Van did not need rural areas or rivers to hide his victims. He used abandoned urban buildings, and Gary had more vacant housing than almost any major city in the country. He turned urban decay into his perfect disposal strategy. Tanya Gatlin was 27. Sonia Billingsley was 53. Both women disappeared in early 2014. There's no clear moment when they crossed into Van's path. But that ambiguity is exactly why they became vulnerable. In this city, women could vanish in silence, and no system raised alarms. 9 months later, on October 19th, 2014, officers entered a decomposing structure at 413 East 43rd Avenue after Van directed them there. Inside this exact building, they found 2 bodies. One was Tanya Gatlin. The other was Sonia Billingsley. Van used this house like storage, placing remains inside a structure as if he assumed nobody would ever question why these houses stood empty for years. Autopsy findings confirmed both women passed away from strangulation. There were no weapons involved. Van preferred manual control. He preferred the personal nature of taking oxygen from a living person with his own hands. Christine Williams was 36, a mother of 4 children. Her disappearance did not just leave emptiness, it destroyed her family's stability. February 2014, Gary, Indiana. Christine went missing in a way that felt identical to the others. Quietly, without the world responding. People who knew her said she was trying to get her life back on track. But like many women in Gary at that time, she lived close to the margins. And when you exist near the margins, predators find you first. Van took Christine into another vacant structure at 4330 Massachusetts Street in Gary. This building had stopped being a home years before he ever opened that door. There were no witnesses, no neighbors listening, no functioning utilities, nothing recording time or movement. Inside that environment, Christine Williams passed away by strangulation. Her body remained inside that location for months. Authorities would not find her until October 19th, 2014. Her autopsy confirmed strangulation, consistent with every other victim he was connected to. Tracy Martin was 41. She had a presence people remembered. Her sudden absence caused confusion among those who knew her. June 26, 2014. Gary, Indiana. Tracy Martin was reported missing. For months, nothing surfaced, no leads, and the city just absorbed another disappearance the same way it absorbed all the others. Quietly, Van led Tracy into another abandoned building at 2200 Massachusetts Street. Another shell of a structure still standing, because demolition in Gary moved slower than the rate of collapse. Inside those walls, Tracy Martin passed away the same way the others did. And the silence of that method makes it even more disturbing. No loud sounds, nothing that travels beyond the walls. You can harm someone in complete silence, and the outside world hears nothing. The autopsy confirmed strangulation. Van did not act for attention. He acted for psychological power, his control, his dominance, his ability to decide who continued breathing. Aneth Jones was 35. Her name still echoed in worried conversations because when she vanished, people noticed immediately that something was wrong. October 8, 2014. Gary, Indiana. Aneth Jones disappeared only 9 days before the incident that would finally expose Darren Dion Van permanently. She was last seen in Hammond, and like the others, she walked into his orbit without realizing she was entering a trap. He had spent an entire year harming women inside abandoned structures, and nobody had intervened. Nobody had identified him as a potential threat. After she vanished, her family reported her missing immediately. They did not delay. They did not assume she had left voluntarily. They knew. But still, she stayed missing. When Darren Dion Van was finally locked behind bars and facing the justice system, prosecutors had one major advantage. He had led them to the bodies himself. He gave them the timeline. He provided geographic proof. He confirmed his methods. Indiana prosecutors understood this case was not about proving guilt. It was about determining the sentence outcome. Van was charged with multiple counts. The state openly positioned capital punishment as a possibility. In Indiana, that was not an empty threat. It was leverage. Prosecutors used it exactly the way the system is designed, to force cooperation. His attorneys knew they were not arguing innocence. They were arguing for life instead of execution. As negotiations advanced, everyone involved understood something important. Life imprisonment guaranteed that all confirmed victims remained legally documented. The other option, if appealed for decades, risked complications and potential reversals. So Van entered an agreement. He pleaded guilty. He avoided the death penalty. The judge read the sentence like a final chapter being closed. He was sentenced to multiple life terms without any possibility of parole. Darren Dion Van, whose earliest crimes were protected by his ability to remain invisible, ended his journey not as someone moving freely through abandoned buildings, but as a prisoner locked in a system that finally saw him. He will never walk outside those walls again. But the story does not end there. Because during his confession to police, Van said something that haunts investigators to this day. He claimed he had victims in other states, many other states. He mentioned Illinois, California, Texas, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan. And when asked specifically about Chicago, he said there were a lot more than anyone knew. He told detectives that when he felt himself losing control, he would get on a train or bus. He would travel far from his family, far from people who knew him, And he would find victims in other cities. Random people. Wrong place. Wrong time. He said these incidents went back decades, possibly 20 years or more. Investigators analyzed unsolved cases. They found patterns. Strangulation victims in Chicago. Bodies found near train lines. Women who disappeared during the exact years Van was moving between states. Share this story to spread awareness about the victims society forgets. Subscribe for more true crime stories, and stay alert because evil hides in plain sight, and we never know when danger might strike next. Now let's move on to the fourth horrifying serial killer story. Imagine finding someone you love frozen solid and stuffed up down inside a garbage can. The temperature outside is freezing cold. The body has been missing for weeks. When police arrive, they see bruises shaped like fingerprints around the neck. They notice wounds from fighting back. They find signs of a struggle. But here is the twist that makes no sense. The official report says it was an accident. No crime, no murder, just a drug overdose. How does a young woman end up dead in a trash in the middle of winter, and police call it an accident? This is the story of Amanda Wienckowski, a 20-year-old woman whose death remains one of the most shocking cases in Buffalo, New York. Her family has been fighting for justice for over 16 years. Many doctors have said she was murdered. Evidence points to a death. Yet her death paper still says accidental overdose. What really happened that cold December night in 2008? Who was the last person to see Amanda alive? And why has no one been arrested for what happened to her? The answers will shock you, make you angry, and make you question everything you think you know about justice in America. Amanda Wienckowski was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. She was a bright and hard-working young woman with big dreams. In 2006, she finished high school at Niagara Wheatfield High School. Her mother, Leslie Brill Meserole, remembers Amanda as someone full of life and energy. Amanda was crowned Miss Teen Buffalo at one point when she was a teenager. She was part of everything from dance to swimming to gymnastics. She was the kind of girl who wanted to try everything and be good at all of it. But Amanda had one dream that was bigger than all others. She wanted to become a police officer. She wanted to make a difference in her community. She wanted to protect people and bring justice to those who needed it most. To reach this goal, Amanda joined a special program to get her police officer license. She was one step closer to making her dream come true. Everything seemed to be going well for this hard-working young woman. However, life had other plans for Amanda. Her mother Leslie says that Amanda met some dangerous people while working on her police training. These were people involved in drugs and crime. Somewhere along the way, Amanda started using heroin. What started as drugs quickly became a serious problem. Amanda told her mother once that it felt like the devil was chasing her. No matter how hard she tried to run away, she could still feel the heavy breathing on the back of her neck. It took over Amanda's life. The bright girl with big dreams became trapped in a nightmare she could not escape. But Amanda was a fighter. She did not want to be controlled by drugs. With her mother's help, she tried many times to get clean. Leslie did everything she could to help her daughter. She spent money they did not have on treatment programs. She stayed by Amanda's side through every time she fell back into drugs and every try at getting better. But is a that does not let go easily. To pay for her drugs, Amanda ended up doing sex work. She would have sex for drugs or money to buy drugs. This is where a man named Adam Patterson comes into the story. Adam was much older than Amanda and acted as her boss. He lived on the Tuscarora Reservation in Lewiston, and Amanda lived with him. Adam knew people who could give Amanda what she needed. He would set up meetings between Amanda and these people. Then he would drive her to their homes so the exchanges could happen. This was Amanda's life in the weeks before she disappeared. Despite her problems, Amanda was trying to fix her life. She was taking criminal justice classes at Niagara County Community College. She also worked at a bar called Cocktail Bob's. She had not given up on her dreams completely. She was still fighting to become the person she knew she could be. December 5th, 2008 started like any other day for Amanda. She was supposed to work her shift at Cocktail Bob's that evening. But then Adam Patterson called her at work. He had just gotten off the phone with someone named Antoine Garner. Antoine wanted to meet with Amanda for paid sex. Adam had set up the whole thing. Amanda asked a coworker to cover her shift. Then she left the bar and got into Adam's car. Antoine Garner was not a good person. At 22 years old, he already had a history of crime. People in the neighborhood said he was scary and dangerous. He was built like a bodybuilder and had a reputation for hurting people. His street name was Justice, but there was nothing fair about him. Adam drove Amanda to Antoine's house on Buffalo's east side. According to Adam's story, Amanda got out of the car and went inside. Adam says he waited outside in his car. About an hour passed. Then Amanda called Adam. According to Adam, she told him not to wait for her because she would be a while, so Adam drove away. He says he went home around 8:30 that evening. He says he had no idea where Amanda went after that. Adam Patterson's story is important because he was supposedly the last person to see Amanda before she went into Antoine's house. When Amanda did not come home that night, Leslie began to worry. Amanda always stayed in touch with her mother. Even when she was high or in trouble, she would return her mother's calls. But this time was different. Amanda's phone went straight to voicemail. Hours turned into a full day. Then another day passed. Leslie knew something was very wrong. On December 7th, 2008, Leslie reported her daughter missing to the Buffalo police. The police right away wanted to speak with Adam Patterson since he was the last known person to be with Amanda. Adam told police exactly what he told everyone else. He drove Amanda to Antoine Garner's house for sex. Amanda called him and told him to leave. He went home around 8:30 and had not heard from her since. The police then needed to speak with the person who actually saw Amanda last. That person was Antoine Garner. When officers arrived at Antoine's home, he had a completely different story. Antoine said yes, Adam and Amanda did come to his house that evening. But he said Amanda only stayed for 10 to 15 minutes. According to Antoine, Amanda then left with Adam. The two stories did not match at all. The police asked Antoine directly if he had sex with Amanda that night. Antoine said no to everything. He said Amanda came to his house. They talked for a short time. He gave her what she came for, and she left. No touching. Nothing physical happened between them. This story raised big warning signs. People like Antoine do not give things away for free, especially in deals like these. The whole thing is based on trading. You give something, and you get something back. There is no free stuff. But Antoine said he was feeling nice that day, and simply gave Amanda what she wanted without asking for anything. The police found his story hard to believe. They also found Adam's story suspicious. One of them was lying. Maybe both of them were lying. Days turned into weeks. Amanda's mother and friends searched everywhere they could think of. They checked empty buildings, back streets, drug houses, and anywhere else Amanda might have gone. But she was nowhere to be found. As Christmas came and then passed, the fear grew stronger. Over a month went by with no sign of Amanda Winkowski. For families of missing people, the first 48 hours are the most important. After that, the chances of finding someone alive drop a lot. A month meant the worst was probably true. Then on January 9th, 2009, everything changed. Someone called 911. The caller's name has never been told to the public. The person told police they could find something important in a garbage can on the east side of Buffalo. Police rushed to the location. When they arrived, they saw the garbage can was in a church parking lot. Even more important, it was right across the street from where Antoine Garner lived. Officers walked up to the large trash bin carefully. When they opened the lid and looked inside, they saw something horrible. A frozen body was stuffed inside upside down. The victim was completely naked. Because the body was frozen solid and the head was shaved bald, officers could not tell right away if it was male or female. The face and neck showed clear signs of harm. There were marks that looked like bruises. The only way to identify the person was a butterfly tattoo on the neck. Amanda Winkowski had a butterfly tattoo on her neck. Police had to call Amanda's family to come identify the body. Her brother was the one who confirmed the terrible news. It was Amanda, the young woman who wanted to be a police officer, the daughter who fought so hard against her demons, the girl who still had dreams despite everything life threw at her. She was gone. And she had been dead for over a month. When Amanda's brother called their mother to tell her what he had just seen, Leslie's world fell apart completely. For weeks she had held on to hope that maybe Amanda was just hiding somewhere. Maybe she was too ashamed to come home. Maybe she would walk through the door any day asking for forgiveness. But now, there was no hope left. Only questions. How did Amanda end up in that garbage can? Who put her there? And most importantly, what happened during those missing hours between when she entered Antoine's house and when her frozen body was found? The location of the body was very suspicious. The garbage can belonged to a church right across from Antoine Garner's home. The same Antoine Garner who said Amanda left his house after only 15 minutes. The same Antoine Garner who said nothing physical happened between them. Police brought Antoine in for questioning again. But Antoine said he had nothing to do with Amanda's death. He even said that if he had killed her, he would not be stupid enough to dump her body almost in his own front yard. Amanda's body was taken to the Erie County Medical Examiner's office for an autopsy. This is where the case took an unbelievable turn. The first autopsy said that Amanda Winkowski died from an accidental drug overdose. According to the medical examiner, Amanda got high, became confused, somehow ended up in a trash can, and died there by accident. The report said nothing about the bruises on her body. It ignored the wounds from fighting back. It ignored the fact that she was found naked and frozen. According to the official ruling, Amanda's death was an accident. No crime had happened. This ending was absolutely shocking to anyone who looked at the evidence. You did not need to be a doctor to see that something violent had happened to Amanda. Her body told a story that the medical examiner refused to see. But because the death was called accidental, there was no murder investigation. No suspects, no arrests. The case was basically closed before it ever really began. Amanda's family refused to accept this. Leslie Brill Messerol hired a lawyer named Stephen Cohen to fight for justice. In November 2011, almost 3 years after Amanda's death, a second autopsy was done. This time, 2 independent doctors looked at Amanda's body. Their findings were very different from the first report. According to these doctors, Amanda had been stabbed to death with bare hands. She had wounds showing she fought an attacker, and the drug levels in her body were not high enough to cause an overdose or death. The second autopsy also found something truly. Amanda's tongue was missing from her body. The experts said that someone had murdered Amanda. This was not an accident. This was murder. The 2 autopsies were completely opposite. One said accident, the other said murder. Stephen Cohen also asked for an independent drug test. The results showed that while Amanda did have drugs in her body, the levels were far too low to cause death. However, she did have high levels of a date rape drug in her body. DNA evidence was also found on Amanda's body. Antoine said he never touched Amanda. He said nothing physical happened between them. So why was his DNA found on her body? A third autopsy was ordered by the district attorney in early 2012. This one was done by Dr. Scott LaPointe. However, this autopsy failed to say how she died. Some reports mentioned a possible 4th autopsy, but the results were the same. Unable to tell. Despite all the evidence pointing to murder, Amanda's official death certificate still said cause of death as accidental drug overdose based on that very first bad autopsy. Leslie Brill Messerol could not let this wrong stand. In September 2021, almost 13 years after her daughter was found in that trash can, Leslie filed a lawsuit against Erie County and the chief medical examiner. She wanted Amanda's cause of death changed from accidental overdose to either murder or unknown. Her goal was simple: either change the death certificate or reopen the investigation so the truth could finally be found. But in January 2022, a judge threw out the lawsuit. The reason given was too much time had passed. The time to challenge the original death certificate had closed years ago. Can you imagine being Amanda's mother? Can you imagine fighting for over 10 years only to be told it is too late? Your daughter was dead. Many experts confirm she was dead. DNA evidence links suspects to her body, but because of a technicality, nothing can be done. The anger and heartbreak Leslie has gone through is unimaginable. Throughout all of this, Antoine Garner remained a free man. Well, free from charges related to Amanda's death anyway. Because in 2013, 5 years after Amanda disappeared, Antoine was arrested for a series of violent crimes. The timing of these crimes is scary. They happened between December 2008 and January 2009. The exact time period when Amanda went missing and was later found dead. He attacked another woman by choking her with his bare hands until she almost died. The same method, the same violence, the same pattern. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison in 2013. Think about that for a moment. A man with a history of choking women. A man whose DNA was found on Amanda's body. A man who lied about touching her. Yet he walks free from her case because of one wrong autopsy report. In April 2021, new evidence surfaced. A witness came forward claiming Antoine used a stun gun on Amanda before taking her life. A scientific report backed this up, showing marks on her body that matched stun gun burns. Amanda's mother tried raising $12,000 to have her daughter's body examined one more time. The district attorney promised to reopen the case if solid new evidence appeared. But here we are in 2025, and nothing has changed. Antoine could walk out of prison in 2031, free, while Amanda's mother has spent 16 years fighting, crying, and begging for someone to care. She has paid for autopsies out of her own pocket. She has hired lawyers. She has knocked on every door possible, all for her daughter who wanted to be a police officer, her daughter who was trying so hard to turn her life around. The evidence is right there. DNA, lies, a history of violence, a body found across the street from his house, medical experts calling it murder. Yet one piece of paper saying accidental overdose has stopped everything. One mistake has denied justice for 16 years. And the clock keeps ticking. Amanda's story should make us uncomfortable. It should make us question how this can happen in our justice system. Subscribe to stay updated on cases like this and be part of a community that refuses to let victims be forgotten. We share these stories not for entertainment, but to shine light on injustice and honor those whose voices were taken from them. Now let's move on to the fifth serial killer story. He flew the Queen of England. He commanded Canada's largest military base. And the morning after he murdered one of his own soldiers, he smiled for the cameras at a charity event, posing in handcuffs while his colleagues laughed. For hours, Colonel David Russell Williams hid behind a furnace in Corporal Marie-France Comeau's home, waiting. When she came downstairs looking for her cat, he attacked. He beat her. He documented everything with photographs and videos. And when she begged for her life, he calmly suffocated her with duct tape. 3 days later, he stood at her funeral in full military dress uniform and handed her family a letter of condolence. But Marie wasn't his first victim, and she wouldn't be his last. Williams had been breaking into homes for 2 years. 48 houses where families slept peacefully, never knowing the decorated colonel was in their daughters' bedrooms, stealing underwear and taking photographs of himself wearing it. All while he was living out twisted fantasies with her stolen belongings. His crimes escalated from theft to sexual assault to murder in just 24 months, and he recorded everything. Over 3,000 photographs and multiple videos, organized like a military operation. The most terrifying part? Nobody suspected him. Not his wife, not his colleagues, not the entire nation that trusted him. How did a respected military leader become a monster? What finally exposed him? And what did police find in his home that shocked even the most experienced investigators? This is the story of Colonel Russell Williams, and it will change how you see everyone around you. Colonel David Russell Williams was born on March 7, 1963, in England. His family moved to Canada when he was just a child. His father worked as a scientist at a nuclear research facility in Ontario. Young David grew up in a planned community called Deep River, where educated families lived comfortable lives. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed perfect. But when David was 7 years old, his parents divorced. His mother remarried a man named Jerry Sovka, a nuclear engineer. The family moved to Toronto, where David lived near Lake Ontario. He was a good student. He took piano lessons and trumpet lessons. He delivered newspapers. He seemed like any other kid trying to make his way in the world. As a teenager, David attended an elite boarding school called Upper Canada College. His classmates elected him as a leader in his final year. He was smart, hardworking, and respected. After high school, he went to university and studied economics and politics. During college, he learned to fly airplanes. This skill would shape his entire future. In 1987, David Russell Williams joined the Canadian Armed Forces. He was 24 years old and ready to serve his country. He started as a flying instructor and quickly impressed his superiors. They saw potential in him. They saw a future leader, and they were right, at least on the surface. Williams climbed the ranks year after year. In 1991, He married a woman named Mary Elizabeth Harriman. She had a good career working for a charity organization. Together, they seemed like the perfect couple. They bought a house in Ottawa. They spent time at their vacation cottage on a lake. They played golf. They had friends. They looked happy. By 2004, Williams had become a lieutenant colonel. He was selected to lead an important transport squadron. His job was to fly government officials and foreign dignitaries across the country. He flew Queen Elizabeth II. He flew the Prime Minister of Canada. He flew important people who trusted him with their lives. He was given medals and honors. He was respected by everyone who knew him. In 2009, Williams reached the peak of his career. He became the commanding officer of Canadian Forces Base Trenton, the largest and busiest military airbase in Canada. It was one of the most important positions in the entire armed forces. He was 46 years old. He had achieved everything he had worked for. But something was very wrong. Unknown to anyone, Williams had started breaking into his neighbors' homes back in 2007. At first, he only stole women's and girls' underwear. He would enter houses when families were away or asleep. He would spend hours trying on the stolen items and taking photographs of himself. He kept detailed records of every break-in. He organized the stolen underwear in his home like trophies. For 2 years, he broke into 48 different homes. He returned to some houses multiple times. One young girl's bedroom was visited 3 times. Her parents never suspected anything. The girl even did a school project about the colonel. She baked cookies for him. She took care of his cat. All while he was stealing her personal belongings and living out twisted fantasies. But stealing was not enough anymore. In September 2009, Williams crossed a terrible line. He broke into a cottage where a young woman was alone with her baby. He wore a mask and attacked her with a flashlight. He blindfolded her and tied her hands with wire. He took photographs. The baby slept in the next room while this horror unfolded. Just days later, Williams attended a police conference and accepted an award for his base. He smiled for cameras. He acted completely normal. 2 weeks later, he attacked another woman who lived just a few doors away from his cottage. Same pattern, same mask, same terrible violence. This time, police suspected a different neighbor named Larry Jones. They searched his house. They questioned him. The entire town turned against Jones, believing he was the attacker. But Jones was innocent. The real monster was still free, still wearing his colonel's uniform, still commanding respect. Williams kept breaking into homes, stealing more and more items. He even left a taunting message on one victim's computer, daring her to call police. But his crimes were about to become even worse. On November 24, 2009, Corporal Marie-France Comeau finished working a flight where she served as a flight attendant. She was 38 years old and came from a military family. Her father had been a medic. Her grandfather had been a war hero. She was proud to serve her country. Williams knew her from the base. He knew she lived alone. He had been planning. That night, Williams broke into her house and hid behind her furnace, waiting. When Comeau came downstairs looking for her cat, he attacked. He beat her with a flashlight. He tied her up. He brought in lamps to get better lighting for his photographs and videos. He assaulted her repeatedly for hours. At one point, Comeau asked if he was going to kill her. She begged for her life. Williams covered her mouth and nose with duct tape until she almost suffocated. He carried her unconscious body upstairs to her bed. When he went outside to check if anyone was watching, Comeau woke up and tried to escape. She almost made it to the bathroom. But Williams caught her and beat her again. Then he calmly killed her. He removed the restraints and tape, trying to hide evidence. But he left a shoe print in her blood. After murdering Como, Williams drove 3 hours to attend a meeting. He acted completely normal. When Como's boyfriend found her body the next day, Williams was at a charity fundraiser. His colleagues jokingly pretended to arrest him as part of the event. Williams even posed for photos in handcuffs, smiling. Nobody knew they were standing next to a killer. A few days later, Williams attended Como's military funeral. As her base commander, he even wrote a letter of condolence to her family. But Williams was not finished. On January 28, 2010, he noticed a woman named Jessica Lloyd while he was out jogging. She was 27 years old and lived alone on a rural highway. She worked as an administrator for a school bus company. Williams watched her exercising on her treadmill through her basement window. A few nights later, he broke into her house while she slept. Following his horrible pattern, he bound her with duct tape and took photographs. But this time, he did something different. He forced Lloyd into his vehicle and drove her to his cottage on Cozy Cove Lane. For 15 hours, Lloyd suffered at his hands. She begged him for clothes as she shivered. She pleaded for him to take her to a hospital. She asked him to tell her mother that she loved her. Williams told her to hang in there. He made her pose in lingerie for more photographs. He gave her some fruit to eat, all while recording videos of her suffering. Then Williams struck Lloyd from behind with a flashlight and strangled her to death with a rope. He captured it all on video. He hid her body in his garage. The next morning, he flew a troop transport flight to California as if nothing had happened. Later, he dumped Lloyd's body in the woods near his cottage. When Lloyd did not show up for work, her family immediately went to her house. They found her purse and car in the driveway. Her wallet, identification, and glasses were all there, but Jessica was gone. Police launched a massive search. They set up roadblocks across the entire area. They were looking for a silver SUV that had been seen near Lloyd's house. On February 4th, 2010, police stopped Colonel David Russell Williams at one of these roadblocks. An officer noticed something important. The tires on Williams' Nissan Pathfinder had an unusual pattern. It matched the tire tracks found near Lloyd's house. This was the break police needed. 3 days later, on Sunday, February 7th, Williams received a phone call at his Ottawa home. Police asked him to come to headquarters for questioning. They told him it was just routine. Williams agreed. He probably thought he could talk his way out of it. He had fooled everyone for so long. Why would this time be different? But Detective Sergeant Jim Smith of the Ontario Provincial Police was not fooled. Smith was an expert in behavioral science. He knew how to read people. He knew how to get confessions. For 10 hours, Smith questioned Williams. He laid out the evidence piece by piece. The tire tracks, the timeline, the connections. At first, Williams denied everything. He smiled. He tried to act confused. But as more evidence piled up, his confidence faded. Smith told him about the matching tire treads. He told him about witnesses. He told him they had enough evidence to search his properties. Williams knew it was over. Finally, Williams confessed. For 10 hours, he gave complete details about every crime, every break-in, every assault, every murder. He described his twisted desires. He explained his methods. He told police exactly where to find Jessica Lloyd's body. He even drew them a map. When asked why he did these terrible things, Williams could not give a real answer. All he said was that he did not know, and that the answers probably did not matter anyway. He said he was confessing to make things easier on his wife. At the end of his confession, he wrote her a note. He apologized and asked her to take care of their cat. Police found Lloyd's body exactly where Williams said it would be. They searched his cottage and his Ottawa home. What they discovered shocked even experienced investigators. Williams had kept detailed records of everything. There were nearly 3,000 photographs and multiple videos. He had documented every break-in, every stolen item, every assault, every moment of his victim's suffering. He had organized everything carefully, like a military operation. Police found boxes and bags stuffed with hundreds of pieces of stolen underwear and lingerie. Some items belonged to girls as young as 11. There were photos of stuffed animal-filled bedrooms. There were videos of his victims begging for their lives. There were notes describing each crime. His obsession with documentation had created a complete record of his evil. Within 24 hours of his arrest, the case was solved. The evidence was overwhelming. There was no way to deny what he had done. The news shocked Canada and the world. How could a respected military colonel commit such horrible crimes? How could someone in a position of trust be such a monster? Williams tried to kill himself in his jail cell by stuffing cardboard down his throat. He was placed on suicide watch. On October 18, 2010, he appeared in court in Belleville. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of sexual assault, 2 counts of forcible confinement, and 82 counts of breaking and entering. During the trial, prosecutors showed many of Williams's photographs as evidence. The images were disturbing. They showed him wearing his victim's underwear. They showed him visibly aroused, posing in stolen clothing. Some photos showed cotton panties with cartoon characters. Others showed expensive silk lingerie. The videos were even worse, but prosecutors only described them instead of showing them in court. On October 21, 2010, Justice Robert Scott sentenced Williams to 2 life terms for the murders. He also received 120 years for the other crimes. The judge called Williams's actions depraved and said they had no equal. Williams would not be eligible for parole for 25 years until 2035, when he would be 72 years old. Because he was convicted of multiple murders, he could never apply for early parole under Canadian law. The judge ordered Williams to pay a fine of 8,800 Canadian dollars, $100 for each crime he pleaded guilty to. This money would go to a fund for crime victims. The judge also ordered the destruction of Williams' vehicle, all his photographs and videos, and all the stolen items he had kept. The Canadian military moved quickly. They stripped Williams of his rank, his medals, and his honors. His uniform was burned. His medals were cut into pieces. His commission papers were shredded. His vehicle was crushed and scrapped. These actions were similar to an old military punishment, where soldiers were publicly shamed and expelled. Williams was sent to a maximum security prison in Port Cartier, Quebec. He lives in solitary confinement. He receives a military pension of $60,000 per year, because Canadian law requires an act of Parliament to take away a pension, and this has not been done. Williams' wife, Mary Elizabeth Harriman, did not attend the trial. She later divorced him. One of Williams's surviving victims filed a lawsuit against both Williams and Harriman for $2.5 million. The victim accused them of transferring assets to hide money from legal claims. Shortly after Williams's arrest, the couple had split their property. Harriman kept the expensive Ottawa townhouse while Williams kept the cheap cottage. Multiple lawsuits were eventually settled out of court for undisclosed amounts. The town of Tweed was forever changed. Neighbors who had trusted Williams felt betrayed and violated. The young girl who had done a school project about him had to live with the knowledge that he had been in her bedroom, stealing her belongings. Many people asked how this could happen. How could Williams hide his evil for so long? Experts suggested several possibilities. Some pointed to medications he was taking for chronic pain. Prednisone, a strong anti-inflammatory drug, can sometimes cause changes in behavior and even mental health problems. Williams had been taking this medication since returning from Dubai in 2006. Canadian Air Force guidelines warned that this type of drug was not compatible with flight duties, but nobody had raised concerns about Williams. Nobody knows why Williams became a monster at 44, but this case remains one of Canada's most shocking crimes, proving that evil can hide behind any face, even one wearing a uniform of honor. Subscribe to our channel to be part of this journey. We are committed to telling these true crime stories not for entertainment, but for education. Together, we can build awareness and create safer communities. Now let's move on to the sixth serial killer story. The darkness covered Oak Cliff like a blanket that cold December night in 1990. A woman lay in the middle of the street, her body positioned in a way that made people stop and stare. But something was wrong. Something was missing. When the medical examiner lifted her eyelids, he froze. The eyes were gone, not ripped out, not torn away. They were removed with perfect precision, like a surgeon's work. No blood, no scars, just empty sockets staring into nothing. This was not just a murder. This was art. Dark, twisted art. Someone wanted to collect something precious, something that could never be replaced. Dallas police officers stood around the body, confused and scared. They had seen many murders before, but this was different. This killer was sending a message. He was showing his power, and he was just getting started. 2 months later, another body appeared on the same street. Another woman. Another life. And again, the eye perfectly cut out, taken away like trophies. Fear spread through the streets of Oak Cliff. The killer was choosing his victims carefully, and nobody knew who would be next. The question burned in everyone's mind. What kind of person takes someone's eyes? What darkness lives inside such a man? And most terrifying of all, would they catch him before he struck again? Dallas, Texas in the early 1990s looked beautiful from the outside. Tall buildings touched the sky. Businesses grew every day. People called it the jewel of the Southwest. Everyone wanted to show off their success in their shiny new city. But behind this perfect image, darkness was growing. Crime filled the streets. In 1991 alone, Dallas recorded over 500 murders. Violence became normal. Death became a daily news story. Oak Cliff, once a peaceful middle-class neighborhood in South Dallas, had changed completely. Drugs flooded the area. Crime took over everywhere. Prostitution became an open business. Women walked the streets day and night, desperate for money to feed their addictions. Police officers Regina Smith and John Matthews worked these streets every day. They knew the women well. They did not see them as just criminals. They saw them as human beings trapped in terrible situations. One of these women was Mary Lou Pratt, a 33-year-old mother struggling with drug addiction. Mary grew up near Oak Cliff. Her family still lived close by. She loved them deeply and wanted to escape her life on the streets, but addiction held her tight like chains she could not break. On December 13, 1990, Mary Pratt worked Jefferson Boulevard like many other nights. She needed money, she needed drugs, she needed to survive one more day, but that night would be her last. The next morning, someone found Mary lying in the street in a residential area. She wore only a t-shirt and bra. Her arms were spread above her head. Her face and chest showed signs of bleeding. A single to the head had ended her life. Police arrived at 3 a.m. The location shocked them. This was not a hidden place. Houses surrounded the area. People walked here all the time. Whoever left her here wanted her found quickly. At first, police thought this was just another prostitute murder. Sadly, these deaths happened often in Oak Cliff. Violence against was common. Nobody paid much attention anymore. But then the autopsy revealed something that changed everything. When the medical examiner opened Mary's eyelids to record her eye color, he discovered they were gone. Both eyeballs had been removed with surgical precision. The eyelids showed no cuts, no blood stained the area. Whoever did this had medical knowledge or practiced many times before. Police contacted the FBI immediately. The FBI searched their database for similar crimes across America. They found nothing. This type had never been seen before. This killer was unique. He was collecting trophies. He was taking something deeply personal from his victims. Alone was not enough for him. He needed more. He needed to take their eyes and keep them forever. 50 years before Mary's murder, Oak Cliff was a completely different place. Safe streets, happy families, good neighbors. In 1933, a couple named Dell and Fred Albright adopted a baby boy just 3 weeks after his birth. They named him Charles. Fred worked as a grocer in Dallas. Dell stayed home to raise Charles. She controlled everything in the house. She made all the rules. She decided everything about Charles's life. Dell loved Charles, but her love came with strict control. She made him practice piano for hours. She forced him to follow countless rules about eating, sleeping, and behavior. If he refused to drink his goat milk, she punished him severely. If he would not sleep, she tied him to his bed. If he misbehaved, she locked him in dark rooms alone. She pushed him hard in school. She helped him skip 2 grades. She wanted him to be perfect. But her constant control filled young Charles with mixed feelings about women. He loved his mother, but also felt trapped by her power over him. Despite this difficult home life, Charles showed natural intelligence. He excelled in science classes. He played sports well. Teachers thought he would achieve great things in life. But Dell and Charles shared one unusual hobby that would later take on dark meaning. They practiced taxidermy together. They collected animals from the neighborhood: squirrels, birds, rabbits. They carefully removed the insides, cleaned the bodies, and sewed them back up. The final step was adding eyes to make the animals look alive again. But Dell refused to buy expensive glass eyes from the taxidermy shop. Instead, she made Charles use buttons from her sewing basket. Young Charles would take the bus to the local taxidermy store. He would run his fingers through boxes of beautiful glass eyes. He would stare at them for hours, but he could never buy them. He could only look and dream. 2 months after Mary Pratt's death, the killer struck again. On February 10th, 1991, police discovered another body in Oak Cliff. Susan Beth Peterson, a 27-year-old street worker, lay in the street near where Mary was found. Susan's body told the same terrible story. She had been multiple times. She was partially undressed. Her body was displayed for everyone to see. and when the medical examiner checked her eyes, they were gone, removed with the same surgical precision. Now police knew for certain. A serial was hunting in Oak Cliff. Fear exploded through the community. The media grabbed the story. Newspapers called him the Dallas Ripper and the Dallas Slasher. But soon, everyone knew him by one name: the Eyeball Killer. Police warned all the women working the streets. They increased patrols. They searched for witnesses. But many of the street workers could not stop working. They needed money for their addiction was stronger than their fear of death. Officers Smith and Matthews talked to every woman they knew. The street workers trusted these officers because they treated them with respect. The women shared stories about their worst customers, their most violent encounters, their closest calls with danger. One street worker named Veronica Rodriguez came forward with a frightening story. She claimed she was with Mary Pratt the night Mary died. She said a man attacked both of them, but she managed to escape by hiding in a drainage pipe. She ran barefoot across an open field until she reached safety at someone's house. But Veronica had a drug problem. She often made up stories. Police were not sure if they could believe her. However, they wrote down everything she said just in case. While police searched for clues, Charles Albright lived a quiet life in Oak Cliff. Now 57 years old, he seemed like a normal member of the community. His neighbors liked him. He played softball with local men. He helped people with odd jobs. Charles had lived an unusual life. As a teenager, he got arrested for stealing. A probation officer who interviewed him said Charles was the first teenager he met who could not tell the difference between truth and lies. Charles could convince himself that his crimes never happened. At 17, Charles went to prison for a year. But after his release, he seemed to change. He went to Arkansas State Teachers College. He became president of the French Club. He edited the yearbook. He tried out for the football team and became the starting player. Everyone liked him. He seemed charming and successful. But Charles could never hold a job for long. He would work for a few months, then quit, or get fired. He forged documents to become a high school biology teacher in 1969, but was eventually caught and fired. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, he committed small crimes: theft, fraud, forgery. In 1981, something much darker happened. Charles befriended a family at his church. He spent time with their young daughter. Eventually, the family discovered that Charles had harmed the girl inappropriately. They reported him to police. Charles pleaded guilty but received only probation. The story never made the newspapers. In Oak Cliff, people still saw him as friendly, helpful Charlie. By the late 1980s, Charles lived with a woman named Dixie Austin. She worked at a gift shop and paid most of their bills. She thought Charles was a perfect gentleman who read her poetry and treated her kindly. But Dixie did not know about Charles's secret life. When she left for work, Charles would drive to cheap motels near the interstate. He would visit street workers. Sometimes he brought them to his rental properties. The street workers who knew him remembered two different versions of Charles. Sometimes he was kind and generous. He would buy them food. He would give them money. He told them he worried about their safety. He said he wanted to protect them. But other times, he became violent. He would tie women. He would hit with ropes or extension cords. He would yell. He would hurt them during encounters. Some women saw anger and it scared them deeply. One day in 1990, Charles played softball with his usual team. Two young women drove slowly past the field. One of the players joked that they must be street workers. Then he said to Charles, "Hey Charlie, why don't you go have a taste of that?" Charles turned and looked at the man with cold, dark eyes. He said words that nobody forgot. "I hate street workers. If I had my choice, I'd end them all." On March 19th, 1991, 1 month after Susan Peterson's murder, another body appeared in Oak Cliff. This time near an elementary school where children would see it. Shirley Williams, a 45-year-old street worker, lay undressed on the street. She had been shot time. Her body showed signs of a struggle, and once again her eyes were missing. But this murder was different in several ways. First, Shirley was African American, while the previous 2 victims were white. Second, the killer seemed rushed. The eye removal was not as police found part of an X-acto blade stuck in one of Shirley's eye sockets. The killer had made his first mistake. By now, the entire Oak Cliff area lived in terror. The streets that once filled with street workers became empty. Fear cleared Jefferson Boulevard completely. No women would risk their lives anymore. Officers Smith and Matthews continued investigating. A street worker named Brenda White told them about escaping from a violent customer. She said an older white man with salt and pepper hair tried to take her to some property he owned down south. When she refused, he became enraged. She had to spray him with mace to escape the car. This description reminded the officers of Veronica Rodriguez's earlier story. She had also described her attacker as having salt and pepper hair. The officers remembered that Veronica said a man named Axton Schindler saved her life that night. When they looked up Axton's address, they discovered he rented a property in Oak Cliff. And when they investigated further, they found that the landlord who owned that property also owned 2 other houses near where the bodies were found. The landlord's name was Charles Albright. In the early morning hours of March 22nd, 1991, a tactical police team surrounded a house in Oak Cliff. They burst through the door and grabbed Charles Albright. He acted confused and claimed he had no idea why they were there. Officers Smith and Matthews drove Charles to the police station. The car ride was silent. Smith later said she would never forget looking into Charles's eyes in the rearview mirror. His eyes were completely dark, empty, like looking into nothing. She felt terror run through her body. At the police station, detectives questioned Charles for hours. Meanwhile, other officers searched his house, looking for evidence that connected him to the 3 murders. They found guns hidden behind a secret cover over the fireplace. But none of them matched the murder weapon. They found X-acto knives, but could not connect them to the murders. And most importantly, they never found the missing eyeballs. Dr. Irving Stone, a forensic scientist, was part of the search team. While looking through the house, he noticed a baseball cap on the floor. He asked someone the suspect's name. When they said Charles Albright, Dr. Stone's face went pale. Charles was the right fielder on his softball team. Police searched Charles's properties and found taxidermy animals everywhere. They discovered jars with pickled parts that looked like eyes, but they were only pig eyes. The missing eyeballs were never found. Police needed solid proof. The breakthrough came when they found Shirley Williams's yellow raincoat near Charles's property. On it, they found a squirrel hair. When they vacuumed Charles's truck, they found matching squirrel hairs. Police remembered his taxidermy hobby. This connected Charles directly to the murder scene. Street workers identified him from photos and said he became on December 13, 1990, exactly 1 year after Mary Pratt's murder, Charles Albright's trial began. The prosecution showed hair samples, fiber matches, and witness testimony. His wife Dixie said he was home during the murders, but the jury did not believe it. On December 19, 1991, Charles was found guilty of murdering Shirley Williams. He received life in prison without parole. Why did Charles remove his eyes? Most experts focused on his childhood. His mother made him practice taxidermy but refused to buy glass eyes for animals. He had to use buttons instead. He would stare at beautiful glass eyes in shops but could never have them. This frustration stayed with him forever. As an adult, when violence came, he took eyes from his victims. In prison, Charles drew women's eyes on his cell walls constantly. He never confessed. On August 22, 2020, Charles Albright died at age 87 after spending 29 years in prison. The 6 pairs of missing eyeballs were never found. Mary Lou Pratt, Susan Beth Peterson, and Shirley Williams were daughters, mothers, and friends to survive. Officer Regina Smith forgot them. She felt angry that someone took these lives away. The eyeball killer case shook the nation. It showed that evil hides behind charming smiles. Officers who looked into Charles's eyes saw pure evil. The mystery haunts investigators today. What did he do with those eyeballs? Did he keep them? Hide them? Destroy them? Nobody knows. And now that Charles is dead, nobody will ever know. Subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories that need to be told. Stay alert and stay safe, because darkness can appear in our own neighborhoods. Now let's move on to the 7th serial killer story.
I grabbed her thigh. I could hear her gasping for air. It was like, the switch was flipped and I was choking her and I couldn't stop.
Murder after murder, one woman after another, and still, no one saw the pattern. In Charlotte, North Carolina, between 1992 and 1994, 10 young women made the same mistake. They all knew the man standing at their door. They had served food with him at Taco Bell. They had laughed with him at Bojangles' restaurant. They had invited him to family dinners. But they did not know what lived inside him. While police searched the streets for a dangerous stranger, the real killer sat in their living rooms. He cried at funerals for women he had murdered. He helped families search for daughters he had already killed. He stood beside detectives and pretended to care. His name was Henry Louis Wallace, and he was hiding in plain sight. For nearly 2 years, he moved freely through East Charlotte. He chose victims who trusted him. He entered homes without breaking locks. He killed without leaving obvious clues. And when each woman died, he attended her funeral and comforted her grieving mother. Nobody suspected him. Nobody stopped him. And with each murder, he grew bolder. This is the story of how a trusted friend became Charlotte's most dangerous serial killer. This is the story of the women who opened their doors. And this is the story of how evil can wear the face of someone you know. Henry Louis Wallace was born on November 4, 1965, in Barnwell, South Carolina. His father abandoned the family before Henry was born. His mother, Lottie Mae Wallace, worked long hours at a textile factory to support her children. Life in their home was hard. There was no indoor plumbing. Money was always tight, and Lottie Mae was strict. She used harsh discipline on her son. Neighbors saw a polite boy who said yes, ma'am, and no, sir. But behind closed doors, Wallace learned to hide his true feelings. As a child, Wallace witnessed something that changed him forever. When he was 8 years old, he saw a group of teenage boys assault a girl in the woods. Instead of feeling horror, he felt excitement. That moment planted a dark seed in his mind. At Barnwell High School, Wallace surprised everyone. He joined the student council. He became the only male cheerleader. Teachers called him respectful. Girls found him charming. He knew how to make people like him. He knew how to hide what was growing inside. After graduation in 1983, Wallace worked as a disc jockey at a local radio station. He married his high school girlfriend, Moretta Brabham. In 1985, he joined the United States Navy. From the outside, his life looked promising. But cracks were forming. Wallace started using crack cocaine while in the Navy. The drug took control of him quickly. He also began stealing. First, he stole from the radio station where he had worked. Then, he broke into stores. Police arrested him several times, but he always avoided serious punishment. In 1988, the Navy discharged him. His marriage fell apart. He returned to Barnwell with nothing but anger and addiction. Then in March 1990, something terrible happened. Tashonda Bethia was 18 years old. She was a student at Barnwell High School. She knew Henry Wallace because everyone in the small town knew each other. On March 8, 1990, Tashonda disappeared. 3 weeks later, her body was found floating in a pond. She had been strangled and her throat had been cut. Someone had weighed her body down and tried to hide her in the water. Police questioned Wallace because witnesses had seen them together. He told police he did not know what happened to Tashonda. Without physical evidence, police let him go. That was the first time police let him walk away. It would not be the last. After Tashonda's death, Wallace faced more legal trouble. Police arrested him for trying to force himself on a 16-year-old girl at gunpoint, but somehow, those charges disappeared. In February 1991, Wallace broke into his old high school and the radio station. He stole equipment and tried to sell it. This time, he went to prison, but he served only 3.5 months. When he was released in February 1992, Wallace decided to leave Barnwell. He moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, looking for a fresh start. Charlotte had no idea what was coming. Wallace arrived in Charlotte in late 1991. He quickly found work at fast food restaurants in East Charlotte. He worked at Bojangles serving fried chicken. He worked at Taco Bell, making tacos and burritos. He became a manager at one Taco Bell location. His co-workers liked him. Customers found him friendly. He seemed like a regular guy trying to make a living. But the darkness inside him had not disappeared. The crack cocaine addiction was stronger than ever. And soon, the urge to kill returned. Sharon Nance, May 1992. Sharon Nance was 33 years old. She had struggled with drugs and had worked as a prostitute. She had a criminal record, but her family remembered her as a kind woman who loved to draw and write poetry. She had a young son who needed her. In May 1992, Wallace picked up Sharon and offered her money for sex. When they finished, Sharon asked for payment. Wallace became angry. He grabbed a rock and beat her to death. He dumped her body near railroad tracks. On May 27, 1992, someone found her body. Police investigated, but Sharon's lifestyle made detectives think her death was connected to drugs or prostitution. They did not connect it to Wallace. They did not realize a serial killer had just claimed his second victim. Wallace had now killed in 2 different cities, and he was getting away with it. Caroline Love. June 1992. Caroline Love was 20 years old. She worked at Bojangles restaurant on Central Avenue. She was a good employee, always on time, always smiling. Caroline was also the roommate of Wallace's girlfriend at the time. On June 14th, 1992. Wallace went to the apartment Caroline shared with his girlfriend. His girlfriend was not home. Caroline let him inside because she knew him well. Once inside, Wallace attacked her. He raped her and then strangled her until she stopped breathing. He took her body and dumped it in a wooded area outside Charlotte. Then Wallace did something shocking. He helped his girlfriend file a missing person report for Caroline. He went to the police station with them. He pretended to be worried. He asked police to find his girlfriend's missing roommate. Caroline's body would not be discovered for nearly 2 years. Police had no idea that the helpful boyfriend filing the report was actually the killer. In 1993, Wallace's murders increased. The pattern became clear, but police still did not see it. Each victim knew Wallace. Each victim trusted him. Each victim let him into her home. Shauna Hawk, February 1993. Shauna Hawk was 20 years old. She was a student at Central Piedmont Community College. She worked at Taco Bell, where Wallace was her supervisor. Shauna was quiet and hardworking. On the night of her junior prom, she even took off her fake fingernails during the car ride and threw them out the window on Independence Boulevard because she thought they were too fancy for her. On February 19, 1993, Wallace went to Shauna's family home. She let him inside without hesitation. He was her boss and her friend. Wallace raped Shauna and then strangled her. He placed her body in the bathtub and filled it with water. Then he stole her bank card. Shauna's mother, Dee Sumter, found her daughter's body. The pain was unbearable, but what came next was worse. Wallace attended Shauna's funeral. He hugged Dee Sumter. He cried with her. He told her how sorry he was that someone had killed her beautiful daughter. Dee Sumter had no idea she was hugging her daughter's murderer. Audrey Spain, June 1993. Audrey Spain was 24 years old. She had come to Charlotte from a small town in South Carolina, hoping to work with computers. Instead, she ended up working at Taco Bell alongside Wallace. Her parents called her Baby. She was their precious daughter. On June 22, 1993, Wallace attacked Audrey in her apartment. He raped and strangled her. Then he dressed her body in her Taco Bell uniform, staging the scene to confuse police. He stole her ATM card and withdrew money from her bank account. Audrey's body was discovered on June 25th by worried co-workers who wondered why she had not shown up for work. Police investigated. They collected evidence. They interviewed co-workers, including Wallace. He told them how kind Audrey had been. He seemed genuinely sad. Still, nobody suspected him. Valencia Jumper, August 1993. Valencia Jumper was 21 years old. She was a computer science student at Johnson C. Smith University. She came from Columbia, South Carolina. She was smart and had a bright future ahead of her. Valencia knew Wallace through his sister. They were friends. When Wallace knocked on her apartment door on August 10, 1993, she opened it without fear. Wallace raped and strangled Valencia in her own home. But this time, he did something different. He poured flammable liquid over her body and set her apartment on fire. He wanted to make her death look like an accident. Firefighters rushed to the Lake Apartments complex. They found Valencia's burned body. The fire department initially ruled her death as an accidental fire, possibly from cooking. Wallace attended Valencia's funeral with his sister. They sent the family condolence cards. Nobody knew that the fire was not an accident. Nobody knew Valencia had been murdered. Michelle Stinson, September 1993. Michelle Stinson was 20 years old. She was a college student studying graphic design at Central Piedmont Community College. She was also a single mother of 2 young boys. She knew Wallace through Taco Bell. She considered him a friend. On September 14, 1993, Wallace went to Michelle's apartment. She let him inside while her 2 small children played in the living room. Wallace raped Michelle. Then he strangled and stabbed her. Her older son, who was only 3 years old, saw his mother lying on the kitchen floor. He thought she was sleeping. Michelle's body was discovered hours later. Her 2 young sons had lost their mother forever. Police processed the scene. They found no signs of forced entry. They found no evidence pointing to a suspect. The case went cold. By early 1994, Wallace was spiraling out of control. His crack cocaine use was constant. His need to kill was overwhelming. He stopped being careful. Vanessa Little Mack, February 1994. Vanessa Mack was 25 years old. She had a 4-month-old daughter named Natalia. Wallace knew Vanessa through her sister, who worked with him at Taco Bell. Wallace later said he fell in love with Vanessa the first time he saw her. He often visited her apartment to spend time with baby Natalia. On February 20th, 1994, Wallace attacked Vanessa in her home. He raped and strangled her while her baby daughter lay on a nearby couch. He left Natalia alive, but took Vanessa's life. Police found her body. They noted no forced entry. They interviewed everyone who knew her. Wallace's name came up, but there was no evidence against him. Not yet. Betty Jean Baucom, March 1994. Betty Jean Baucom was 24 years old. She worked at Bojangles restaurant as an assistant manager. Wallace's girlfriend also worked there. March 8, 1994, was the day after Betty's birthday. Wallace went to her apartment, robbed her, raped her, and strangled her. Then he stole her car, her bank card, and valuable items from her home. He pawned everything except the car, which he left at a shopping center. On March 9th, Wallace used Betty's stolen ATM card. Surveillance cameras at the bank captured his image. This was the mistake that would finally catch him. Police now had a photograph. They had evidence connecting Wallace to a murder victim. But Wallace was not done yet. Brandy Henderson, March 1994. Brandy Henderson was only 18 years old. She had a 10-month-old son named Tyrese. She was the girlfriend of Wallace's best friend, Burness Woods. Wallace raped Brandy while she held baby Tyrese in her arms. Then he strangled her. When Tyrese started crying, Wallace choked the baby with a towel to silence him. Miraculously, Tyrese survived. When police found Brandy's body, they also found her injured but alive baby son. For the first time, there was a living witness, even though he was too young to speak. Deborah Slaughter, March 1994. Deborah Slaughter was 35 years old. She was tall and strong. She had a beautiful singing voice and sang in her church choir. She also worked at Bojangles. On March 12, 1994, Wallace attacked Deborah in her apartment. She fought hard. Her strength was clear from the evidence found at the scene. But Wallace overpowered her. He raped her and then stabbed her 38 times. He strangled her and stole money from her apartment to buy more drugs. Deborah's body was found the same day. By now, police knew something terrible was happening. 3 women had been murdered within days of each other. All lived in the same area. All worked at fast food restaurants. Finally, police realized they had a serial killer in Charlotte. And they finally had a suspect, Henry Louis Wallace. On March 13, 1994, Charlotte Mecklenburg police located Wallace hiding in a friend's bathroom. They arrested him without incident. Wallace had been planning to leave Charlotte that day. He was going to run back to Barnwell, but police got to him first. At police headquarters, detectives questioned Wallace for hours. They showed him the ATM surveillance photo. They laid out the evidence. They told him they knew he had been with multiple victims before they died. At first, Wallace denied everything, but as the hours passed and the evidence piled up, his story fell apart. Finally, Wallace asked for a cigarette break. When he came back to the interview room, he looked tired. He looked defeated. Then he said, "I'll tell you about all of them." For 12 hours, Wallace confessed. He described each murder in detail. He explained how he killed the women, where he dumped their bodies, and what he stole from them. He admitted to killing 10 women in Charlotte. Then he confessed to murdering Tashanda Bethia back in Barnwell in 1990. 11 women, 11 lives stolen, 11 families destroyed. And Wallace had been walking among them the whole time. Wallace's trial began in September 1996. Prosecutors presented his detailed confessions, forensic evidence, and financial records showing he used victims' bank cards after their deaths. Families of the victims sat in the courtroom and listened to how their daughters had died. Some mothers cried. Others stared at Wallace with hatred in their eyes. Dee Sumter, Shauna Hawk's mother, spoke about the pain of hugging her daughter's killer at the funeral. She described the betrayal she felt when she learned the truth. On January 7, 1997, the jury found Wallace guilty of 9 counts of first-degree murder. He was also convicted of multiple counts of rape and robbery. On January 29, 1997, the judge sentenced Wallace to 9 death sentences plus additional life terms. Wallace stood and spoke to the victims' families. He said, "None of these women deserved what they got. They did nothing to me that warranted their death." But his words brought no comfort. As of today, December 2024, Henry Louis Wallace remains on death row at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. He has been there for over 27 years. He has filed multiple appeals, but none have succeeded. In 1998, Wallace married a former prison nurse named Rebecca Torrejas in a ceremony held next to the execution chamber. The families of his victims continue to live with their loss. Dee Sumter founded an organization called Mothers of Murdered Offspring to help other families who have lost loved ones to violence. Tyrese Woods, Brandy Henderson's son who survived being strangled as a baby, is now an adult. He gave his first interview about his mother in 2024. The women Wallace murdered were daughters, mothers, sisters, and friends. They were working toward their dreams. They were employees doing honest work. They trusted the wrong person, and they paid with their lives. Their names deserve to be remembered. Tashanda Bethia, Sharon Nance, Caroline Love, Shauna Hawk, Audrey Spain, Valencia Jumper, Michelle Stinson, Vanessa Little Mack, Betty Jean Baucom, Brandy Henderson, and Deborah Slaughter. This is not just a story about a serial killer. This is a story about how evil can hide behind a familiar face. We share these stories to honor the victims and to spread awareness about how predators operate. Join our community by subscribing to our channel. Together, we can remember the victims and learn from their stories. Stay safe, stay aware, and never forget the 11 women whose lives were stolen by someone they trusted.